poetic section begins with Job out of his misery, cursing the day he was born and wishing that he had died at birth. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Job said, "Let the day perish in which I was born, and the night that said, a man-child is conceived. Why did I not die at birth, come forth from the womb and expire? Why were there knees to receive me, or breasts for me to suck? Or why was I not buried like a stillborn child, like an infant that never sees the light?" Eliphaz is the first friend to respond, and his response sets the tone for what all the friends will say. In their opinion, Job has received what was coming to him. God does not, they claim, wrongfully punish the innocent, but only the guilty. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered, "If one ventures a word with you, will you be offended? But who can keep from speaking? Think now who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed." All three friends will have similar things to say throughout the many chapters of their speeches. Job is guilty, he should repent, and if he does so, God will relent and return him to his favor. If he refuses, he is simply showing his recalcitrance and willfulness before the God who punishes those who deserve it. These friends seem well versed in the views of the Israelite prophets we considered in chapters 2 and 3. And so, Bildad, for example, insists that God is just and seeks Job's repentance. Then Bildad, the Shuhite, answered, "How long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children sinned against him, he delivered them into the power of their transgression. If you will seek God and make supplication to the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore to you your rightful place. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great." Zophar too thinks that Job's protestations of innocence are completely misguided and an affront to God. If Job is suffering, it is because he is guilty and is getting his due. In fact, he deserves far worse. Then Zophar the Naamathite answered, "Should a multitude of words go unanswered, and should one full of talk be vindicated? Should your babble put others to silence, and when you mock, shall no one shame you? For you say, my conduct is pure, and I am clean in God's sight. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom. For wisdom is many-sided. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves." And this is what Job's friends are saying. Sometimes they bar no holds in accusing Job wrongly of great sin before God, as when Eliphaz later declares, "Is it for your piety that he reproves you and enters into judgment with you? Is not your wickedness great? There is no end to your iniquities, for you have stripped the naked of their clothing. You have given no water to the weary to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. You have sent widows away empty-handed, and the arms of the orphans you have crushed. Therefore snares are around you, and sudden terror overwhelms you." The word "therefore" in the final couplet is essentially important. It is because of Job's impious life and unjust treatment of others that he is suffering, and for no other reason. For Job, it is this charge itself that is unjust. He has done nothing to deserve his fate, and to maintain his personal integrity, he has to insist on his own innocence. To do otherwise would be to lie to himself, the world, and God. He cannot repent of the sins he has never committed and pretend that his suffering is deserved when in fact he has done nothing wrong. As he repeatedly tells his friends, he knows full well what sin looks like, or rather tastes like. And he would know if he had done anything to stray from the paths of godliness. "Teach me, and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have gone wrong. How forceful are honest words. But your reproof, what does it reprove? But now be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Is there any wrong on my tongue? Cannot my taste discern calamity? In graphic and powerful images, Job insists that despite his innocence, God has lashed out at him and attacked him and ripped into his body like a savage warrior on the attack. I was at ease and he broke me in two. He seized me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He set me up at his target. His archers surround me. He slashes open my kidneys and shows no mercy. He pours out my gall on the ground. He bursts upon me again and again. He rushes at me like a warrior. My face is red with weeping, and deep darkness is on my eyelids. Though there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. With violence he seizes my garment. He grasps me by the collar of my tunic. He has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry to you, and you do not answer me. I stand, and you merely look at me. You have turned cruel to me. With the might of your hand, you persecute me. Job constantly feels God's terrifying presence, which he cannot escape, even though asleep at night. He pleads with God to relieve his torment. 3 times. Anyway, to leave him in peace just long enough to allow him to swallow. When I say, my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my comfort, then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that I would choose strangling and death rather than this body. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. Let me alone, for my days are a breath. Will you not look away from me for a while? Let me alone until I swallow my spittle. In contrast, those who are wicked prosper, with nothing to fear from God. Why do the wicked live on, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? Their children are established in their presence, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, and no rod of God is upon them. They sing to the tambourine and the lyre, and rejoice to the sound of the pipe. They spend their days in prosperity, and in peace they go down to Sheol. This kind of injustice might be considered less unfair if there were some kind of afterlife in which the innocent were finally rewarded and the wicked punished. But for Job, there is no justice after death either. As waters fail from a lake and a river wastes away and dries up, so mortals lie down and do not rise again. Until the heavens are no more, they will not awake or be roused out of their sleep. Job realizes that if he tried to present his case before the Almighty, he would not have a chance. God is simply too powerful. But that doesn't change the situation. Job is in fact innocent, and he knows it. God will not turn his back in anger. How then can I answer him, choosing my words with him? Though I am innocent, I cannot answer him. I must appeal for mercy to my accuser. If I summon him and he answers me, I do not believe that he would listen to my voice, for he crashes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. If it is a contest of strength, he is the strong one. If it is a matter of justice, who can summon him? Though I am innocent, my own mouth would condemn me. Though I am blameless, he would prove me perverse. In this, Job is prescient. For at the end of the poetic dialogues, God does appear before Job, who is innocent and blameless, and cows him into submission by his fearful presence as the almighty creator of all. Still, though, Job insists on presenting his case before God, insisting on his own righteousness and his right to declare his innocence. Quote, my lips will not speak falsehood. Until I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. He is sure that God must agree, if only he could find him to present his case. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his dwelling. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in the greatness of his power? No, but he would give heed to me. There, an upright person could reason with him, and I should be acquitted forever by my judge. Would that it were so. Unfortunately, Job's earlier claims turn out to be the ones that are true. God does not listen to the pleas of the innocent. He overpowers them by his almighty presence. Still, at the end of the dialogues, Job throws down the gauntlet and demands a divine audience. Oh, that I had one to hear me. Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Oh, that I had the indictment written by my adversary. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it on me like a crown. I would give him an account of all my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. This final demand receives a divine response, but not before another friend appears to state still more forcefully the prophetic case against Job, that he is being punished for his sins. Elihu, son of Barashel, appears out of nowhere and enters the discussion, delivering a speech that separates Job's demand for a divine audience and the appearance of God himself on the scene. In this speech, Elihu rebukes Job in harsh terms and exalts God's goodness in punishing the wicked and rewarding the righteous. Job has no time or need to reply to this restatement of his friend's views. Before he can respond, God himself appears in power to overwhelm Job with his presence and cow him into submission in the dirt. God does not appear with a still, small voice from heaven, or in human guise, or in a comforting dream. He sends a violent and terrifying whirlwind and speaks to Job out of it, roaring out his reprimand. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what word's basis sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together, and all the heavens being shouted for joy? In his anger, God reproves Job for thinking that he, a mere mortal, can contend with the one who created the world and all that is in it. God is the Almighty, unanswerable to those who live with petty existence here on earth. He asks Job a series of impossible questions, meant to grind Job into submission before his divine omnipotence. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place? Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked into the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all this. Have you entered into the storehouses of the snow, or have you seen the storehouses of the hail? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds so that a flood of waters may cover you? Can you send forth lightnings so that they may go and say to you, here we are? Is it by your wisdom that the hawk soars and spreads his wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes its nest on high? This demonstration of raw divine power, it is God, not Job, who is the creator and ruler of this world, leads to the natural conclusion. If God is almighty and Job is a pathetically weak mortal, who is he to contend with God? Job submits in humility, but God is not finished with him. He speaks a second time from the whirlwind. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you declare to me. Will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? Have you an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? No, obviously not. Job had predicted if God ever were to appear to him, he would be completely overpowered by his divine majesty and driven to submit before him, whether innocent or not. And that's exactly what happens. When God's thundering voice is finally silenced, Job repents and confesses. I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, and by now my eyes see you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Readers have read this climax to the poetic dialogues in a variety of ways. Some think that Job got everything he had wished for, a divine audience, and was satisfied with that. Others think that Job came to realize his inherent guilt before the Almighty. Others think that once Job has recognized the enormity of God's creation, he can put his individual suffering in a cosmic perspective. Still, others think that the point is that God has far too much on his hands, the governance of the entire universe after all, to be all that concerned about Job's quibbles regarding innocent suffering. I don't think any of these answers is right. Job did want a divine audience, but that was so he could declare his innocence before God. And he is never given a chance to get a word in. Nor is there any sense in which Job comes to realize that in fact he was guilty before God after all. When he repents, he does not repent of any wrongdoing. He repents of having thought he could make his case before the Almighty. Nor does it seem fair to relativize a person's suffering, because the word is, after all, a very big and amazing place. And it can't be true that the Lord God has too many other things to worry about other than Job's miserable little life. The entire point of Job's speeches is not that God is absent from his life, but that he is far too present, punishing Job in ways that make no sense because he has done nothing wrong. It cannot be overlooked that in the divine response from the whirlwind to Job's passionate and desperate plea for understanding why he, an innocent man, is suffering so horribly, no answer is given. God does not explain why Job suffers. He simply asserts that he is the Almighty and as such cannot be questioned. He does not explain that Job had committed sins of which he was simply unaware. He does not say that the suffering did not come from him, but from other humans or demonic beings who were behaving badly toward Job. He does not indicate that it has all been a test to see if Job would remain faithful. His only answer is that he's the Almighty who cannot be questioned by mere mortals, and that the very quest for an answer, the very search for truth, the very impulse to understand is an affront to his powerful being. God is not to be questioned, and reasons are not to be sought. Anyone who dares to challenge God will be withered on the spot, squashed into the dirt by his overwhelming presence. The answer to suffering is that there is no answer, and we should not look for one. The problem with Job is that he expects God to deal rationally with him, to give him a reasonable explanation of the state of affairs, but God refuses to do so. He is, after all, God. Why should he have to answer to anybody? Who are we, mere mortals, to question God? This response of God from the whirlwind seems to get God off the hook for innocent suffering. He can do whatever the fuck he wants, since he's the Almighty and he's not accountable to anyone. On the other hand, does it really get him off the hook? Doesn't this view mean that God can maim, torment, murder at will and not be held accountable? As human beings, we're not allowed to get away with that. Can God? Does the fact that he's Almighty give him the right to torment innocent souls and murder children? Does might make right? Moreover, if the point is that we cannot judge the cruel acts of God by human standards, where the fuck does that leave us? In the Bible, aren't humans made in the image of God? Aren't human standards given by God? Doesn't he establish what is right and fair and just? Aren't we to be like him in how we treat others? If we don't understand God by human standards, how can we understand him at all since we're fucking human? Isn't this explanation of God's justice at the end of the day simply a fucking cop-out? A refusal to think hard about the disasters and evils in the world as having any meaning whatsoever? It may be that Job's problem is that he has read the wisdom literature and the prophets and think there must be a connection between sin and punishment, since otherwise it doesn't make sense to him that he's suffering. Maybe he should have read the book of Ecclesiastes instead. For there, we find the view that suffering does not come from known causes or known reasons. Suffering just comes, and we need to deal with it as best we can. Ecclesiastes and our ephemeral existence. What's going on, T-Man X? Mary Jane, Suzanne, Thomas. Even my haters. What's up with you players? Mr. Meme, what's good, bro? I am unbanned. All right, but don't get banned again, goddamn. You're in trouble. I pray that you make peace with yourself in Jesus. Hey, I pray you do the same. How about that? It's a good book, man. God's Problem. How the Bible fails to answer our most important question, why we suffer. New York Times bestseller by the one and only, the incomparable, Bart Ehrman. This is where we at. We right here. I love you too, T-Man. Yeah, Chris, you got to get this book, son. Ecclesiastes has long been one of my favorite books of the Bible. It's normally included among the wisdom books of the Hebrew scriptures because its insights into life come not from some kind of divine revelation, but from a deep understanding of the world and how it works. Unlike other wisdom books such as Proverbs, however, the wisdom Ecclesiastes imparts is not based on knowledge acquired by generations of wise thinkers. It's based on the observations of one man as he considers life in all its aspects and the certainty of death. Moreover, like the poetic dialogues of Job, Ecclesiastes is a kind of anti wisdom book in the sense that the insights it gives run contrary to the traditional views of a book like Proverbs, which insists that life is basically meaningful and good, that evil is punished and right behavior rewarded. Not so for the author of Ecclesiastes, who calls himself the teacher. On the contrary, life is often meaningless, and in the end, all of us, wise and foolish, righteous and wicked, rich and poor, all of us die. And that's the end of the story. There is no better way to identify the overarching message of the book than simply to consider its powerful opening lines. In them, the author identifies himself as the son of David and the king in Jerusalem. The author, in other words, is claiming to be none other than Solomon, known from other traditions as the wisest man on earth. Scholars are reasonably sure, however, that whoever wrote this book, it could not have been Solomon. Just on the linguistic level, the Hebrew of the book has been influenced by later forms of the Aramaic language, and it contains a couple of Persian loanwords, plausibly only after the thinkers of Israel have been influenced by the thinkers of Persia. Usually, this book is dated to about the 3rd century BCE. In any event, its opening statement virtually says it all. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what is done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. The people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. The key term here is vanity. All of life is vanity. It passes by quickly and then is gone. The Hebrew word is hevel, a word that can also be translated to mean emptiness, absurdity, uselessness. Hevel literally refers to a mist that evaporates, so that its root idea is something like fleeting or ephemeral. The word occurs about 30 times in this relatively short book. For this author, everything in the world is ephemeral and destined soon to pass away, even we ourselves. Placing ultimate value and putting ultimate importance in the things of this world is useless, vain. All things are fleeting, ephemeral. In the guise of Solomon, this author indicates that he tried everything in order to make life meaningful. He sought for great wisdom. He indulged himself in pleasure. He engaged in large building projects. He accumulated masses of possessions. But then he reflected on the meaning of it all. Quote, I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had spent in doing it. And again, all was vanity and a chasing after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. Despite being rich, wise, and famous, he, quote unquote, hated life and gave his heart up to despair. In the end, he drew his conclusion. There is nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in their toil. It is not that the teacher had given up on God or on life. On the contrary, he thought that enjoying the simple things of life comes from the hand of God. But even these things are fleeting and ephemeral, vanity and chasing after wind. Here is a biblical author I can relate to. Look around and consider everything you work so hard for, everything that you hope to accomplish in life. Suppose you pursue wealth and become fabulously rich. In the end, you die and someone else inherits your wealth. Suppose you want to leave your wealth to your children. Well, that's fine, but they too will die, as will their children and their children after them. What's the point of devoting your life to someone, or something rather, that you cannot keep? Or suppose you decide to spend your life on intellectual pursuits. You will eventually die, and your brain will stop working. And then, where will your wisdom be? Or suppose all you want in life is great pleasure. It too is completely fleeting. You can never get enough of it. And then your body grows old, racked with pain, and eventually ceases to exist. So what actually is the point? Moreover, for this author, traditional wisdom was inherently flawed. Another reason I like him so much. It simply is not true that the righteous are rewarded in life and the wicked perish. In my vain life, I have seen everything. There are righteous people who perish in their righteousness, and there are wicked people who prolong their life in their evil doing. There are righteous people who are treated according to the conduct of the wicked, and there are wicked people who are treated according to the conduct of the righteous. I said that this is also vanity. The reason it is all hevel is that everyone dies, and that's the end of it. Everything that confronts them is vanity, since the same fate comes to all, to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to those who sacrifice and to those who do not sacrifice. As are the good, so are the sinners. The same fate comes to everyone. Even in this life, before death, rewards and punishments are not meted out according to merit. Everything is dependent on chance. Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful. But time and chance happen to them all. For no one can anticipate the time of disaster. Like fish taken in a cruel net, and like birds caught in a snare, so mortals are snared at a time of calamity, when it suddenly falls upon them. Nor for this author should it be thought that there is a good afterlife for those who have been good, wise, faithful, and righteous, or punishment for those who die in their sins. There are no rewards or punishments after death. Life is all there is, and so it should be cherished while we have it. In the teacher's memorable phrase, a living dog is better than a dead lion. And he explains why. The living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no more reward, and even the memory of them is lost. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished. Never again will they have any share in all that happens under the sun. You might think that all this thought about the fleeting character of life would lead to utter depression and suicide. But not for this author. It's true that he is pessimistic and claims that he despairs of finding deeper, ultimate meaning. But suicide cannot be the answer, because that puts an end to the only good thing we have, life itself. Moreover, his constant refrain throughout the book is that given the ultimate impossibility of understanding this world and making sense of what happens, the very best thing we can do is enjoy life while we have it. On 7 occasions in the book, he tells his readers that they should, quote, eat, drink, and be merry. And so he says, this is what I have seen to be good. It is fitting to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of the life God gives us, for this is our lot. So I commend enjoyment, for there is nothing better for people under the sun than to eat and drink and enjoy themselves, for this will go with them in their toil through the days of life that God gives them under the sun. This strikes me as some of the best advice to be found in any ancient writing. Even though there are people, lots of people, who claim to know what happens to us when we die, the truth is that none of us knows, and none of us ever will know until it's too late for our knowledge to do us any good. My own suspicion is that the teacher was right, and that there is no afterlife, that this life is all there is. This should not drive us to despair. However, it should drive us to enjoy life to the uppermost for as long as we can and in every way we can, cherishing especially the precious parts of life that can give us innocent pleasure, intimate relationships, loving families, good friendships, good food and drink, throwing ourselves into our work and our play, doing what we enjoy. But with this view of the world, what about suffering? For the teacher, pain, as well as pleasure, is fleeting and ephemeral. He does not deal with the kinds of intense pain and misery found, say, in the book of Job. His concern is more with the pain of existence itself. This existence cries that all of us confront simply as part of being human. It is not difficult, though, to recognize how he would deal with suffering in extremis where he confronted with it. It too is hevel. To be sure, we should work to overcome suffering in ourselves and others. Freedom from pain is a major goal for those of us living from these fleeting lives of ours. But life is more than simply avoiding suffering. It is also enjoying what can come to us in our short stay here on earth. In some respects, the teacher appears to have had a view of suffering similar to that found in the poetic dialogues of Job, but decidedly not like the view in the folk tale at the book's beginning and conclusion. The author of Ecclesiastes is explicit that God does not reward the righteous with wealth and prosperity. Why then is there suffering? He doesn't know, and he was the wisest man ever to have lived. We should take a lesson from this. Despite all our attempts, suffering sometimes defies explanation. This is like the poetic dialogues of Job, where God refuses to explain to Job why he has inflicted such pain upon him. It differs from Job in that for Ecclesiastes, God is not responsible for the pain in the first place. For Job, God inflicts pain and suffering, but refuses to say why. As I pointed out, I find this view completely unsatisfying and almost repugnant that God would beat, wound, maim, torture, and murder people, and then, rather than explain himself, overpower the innocent sufferers with his almighty presence and grind them into silence. I find the teacher's view much more amenable. Here, too, there is ultimately no divine answer to why we suffer. But suffering doesn't come from the Almighty. It is simply something that happens on earth caused by circumstances that we can't control and for reasons we can't understand. And what do we do then? What do we then do about it? We avoid it as much as we can. We try to relieve it in others whenever possible, and we go on with life, enjoying our time here on earth as much as we can until the time comes for us to expire. Chapter 7. God has the last oh shit. That's some good shit. That's some good shit right there, son. That's some good shit right there. All right. Chapter 7. God has the last word. Jewish Christian apocalypticism. When I tell people that I'm writing a book about suffering, I typically get one of two responses. Some people immediately feel compelled to give me the explanation for why there is pain and misery in the world. Almost always the explanation is that we have to have free will. Otherwise, we will be like robots running around on perfect planet Earth. And since there is free will, there is suffering. When I respond by suggesting that free will can't solve all the problems of suffering, hurricanes in New Orleans, tsunamis in Indonesia, earthquakes in Pakistan, and so on, my discussion partner normally gets a kind of confused look and is either silent or decides to change the subject. The other response, though, is actually more common. Some people, when they hear that I'm writing about suffering, want to talk about something else. I used to think that I had the perfect conversation stopper at cocktail parties. All I had to do was mention that what I do for a living. Someone comes up to me, Chardonnay in hand, we make small talk, and he asks me what I do. I tell him I teach at the university. Oh, what do you teach? New Testament and early Christianity. Long pause. And then, oh, that must be interesting. And then he heads off without a single idea about how to ask a follow-up question. Now that I'm writing this book, I have an even better stumper. What are you working on these days? I'm writing a book about suffering. Pause. Oh, longer pause. And what will you be doing next? And so it goes. The reality is that most people don't want to talk about suffering, except to give you an answer that explains all the pain, misery, and anguish in the world in 15 seconds or less. This, of course, is completely human and natural. We don't want to occupy ourselves with pain, but with its absence, or even better, with its opposite, pleasure. And it's very easy for those of us in comfortable American circumstances to keep far removed from the pain of the world. Wait, where the fuck was I? Oh, yeah. We don't have to deal with death very much. The funeral home makes all the arrangements. We don't even have to grapple with the death of the animals we eat. Heaven forbid that we should actually have to observe the butcher cutting up the meat, let alone watch the poor beast gets killed the way our grandparents did. We're particularly adept at keeping suffering around the world at bay, especially the suffering that does not make the headlines. But in some parts of the world, it is there, every day, front and center, impossible to ignore. Most of us had not thought much about malaria until October 2005, when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation announced that it was funding 3 grants totaling just over $250 million to help find and develop an effective vaccine and to work out ways to control the spread of the disease, which occurs almost entirely through mosquito bites. Then some of us took notice. Malaria is a horrible disease with ravaging and widespread effects, and it is almost completely preventable in theory. The extent of the misery it produces is breathtaking. The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases estimates that between 400 and 900 million children, almost all of them in sub-Saharan Africa, contract an acute case of malaria every year. An average of 2.7 million people dies of it every year. That's more than 7,000 a day, 300 people an hour, 5 every minute. Of malaria, something that most of us never devote a second's attention to. Almost all the fatalities are children. Somehow, apparently, it just doesn't seem that significant to us that all these African children are dying. But what would it be like if 5 children died of an epidemic in our own hometown every minute of every day for years and years? Then I suppose we might be more motivated to do something about it. It may be that the problem will eventually be solved with the generous funding of groups like the Gates Foundation. How many of us can plop down $250 million to deal with this problem? But the misery and suffering of the world sometimes seems like the many-headed Hydra and that Hercules had to deal with. Every time he lopped off a head, 2 more would grow back in its place. Every time one problem is solved, we come to realize that there are 2 more just as severe. Solve malaria, and then you have the problem of AIDS. Solve AIDS, and then you have the problem of drinking water, and so on. Drinking water, as it turns out, is an enormous problem. Most of us, again, don't think that much about it. Our choices are tap or bottled. Some of us are far beyond drinking anything from the tap, thank you very much, and have our bottled water delivered every week. A good part of the world would give a right arm just for the clean tap water that we reject. In fact, millions of people are giving up their lives for not having it. According to an organization known as Global Water, founded in 1982 by former U.S. Ambassador John McDonnell and Dr. Peter Bourne, a former United Nations Assistant Secretary, there are more than 1 billion men, women, and children in the world who do not have safe water to drink. The situation such people typically face is dire. Many of them are malnourished to begin with, and the contaminated water they drink carries waterborne parasites that continuously multiply in their weakened bodies, robbing them of the nourishment and energy they need to sustain health. Global water indicates that 80% of the fatal childhood diseases throughout the world are caused not by shortages of food and medicine, but by drinking contaminated water. Something like 40,000 men, women, and children die every day from diseases directly related to the lack of clean water. Break it down again, that's more than 25 a minute, every minute. Surely there's a way to solve these problems. If I can drink bottled water delivered to my door every week, nice French wine, micro-brewed beer, and Diet Cokes on demand, surely someone living somewhere else should be able to drink water without parasites in it. I admit, I don't much like thinking about this myself. When I turn on the NCAA basketball tournament tonight and pour out a pale ale or two, I probably am not going to be reflecting on the fact that during the time it takes me to watch the game, 3,000 people around the world will die because they have only unsanitary water to drink. But maybe I should think about it. And maybe I should try to do something about it. This book is not really meant to explain just what we should be doing. There are other authors from far more qualified than I to talk about devising a solution. This book is designed to help us think not about the solution, but about the problem. And the problem I'm addressing is the question of why. Why, at the deep, thoughtful level, is there such pain and misery in the world? I'm not asking the scientific question of why mosquitoes and parasites attack the human body and make it ill, but the theological and religious question of how we can explain the suffering in the world if the Bible is right and a good and loving God is in charge. Different biblical authors, as we have seen, have different explanations for all the pain and the misery. Some think that the pain and suffering sometimes comes from God as a punishment for sin. Some think that misery is created by human beings who abuse and oppress others. Some think that God works in suffering to achieve his redemptive purpose. Some think that pain and misery come as a test from God to see if his people will remain faithful to him, even when it does not pay to do so. Others think that we simply can't know why there's such suffering in the world, either because God the Almighty chooses not to reveal this kind of information to peons like ourselves, or because it is information beyond the ken of mere mortals. When I think about malaria or parasites ingested through contaminated water or other related forms of misery, pain, and death, I personally resonate much more closely with Ecclesiastes than with any of the other options we've seen so far. To think that God is punishing the population of the Sub-Sahara for its sins strikes me as grotesque and malevolent. Okay, where was I? Grotesque and malevolent, something like that. Okay. They certainly aren't suffering from malaria because other human beings are oppressing them, and I see nothing redemptive in their deaths or any indication that God is merely testing them to see if they'll praise him with dying lips racked with pain. Maybe it's simply beyond our ability to understand. Still, other solutions are proffered by the biblical writers, and we should consider these as well. Probably the most significant historically for the development of the Christian religion, and at one time for Judaism as well, is the view found in the last of the Hebrew Bible books to be written, as well as in many of the New Testament books. It's a view that scholars today called apocalypticism. I will explain its name and its basic overarching view later in the chapter. First, I need to indicate where the apocalyptic perspective came from. As it turns out, it originated amongst Jewish thinkers who had grown dissatisfied with the traditional answer for why there is suffering in the world. The answer of the prophets, that suffering came to God's people because they had sinned. Apocalypticists realized that suffering came even more noticeably to the people of God who tried to do God's will, and they had to find an explanation for it. The background of apocalyptic thinking. As we have seen, the theology of the Hebrew prophets was ultimately rooted in a belief that God had, in the distant past, intervened in earthly affairs on behalf of his people Israel. Traditions of God's interventions are at the core of both the Pentateuch and the Deuteronomistic history. God himself created this world, formed the first human beings, gave them their first directives, and punished them when they disobeyed. God destroyed the world by flood when humankind became too wicked. God eventually called one man, Abraham, to become the father of a great nation that would distinctly be his people, and he their God. God interacted with the Jewish patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Jacob's 12 sons, in guaranteeing that his promises would be fulfilled. He guided them to Egypt in a time of famine, and then, 400 years later, he delivered them out of Egypt, where they had become slaves. It was especially through Moses that God had seemed to work mighty wonders for his people by sending plagues upon the oppressive Egyptians, which in turn led to the Exodus, the crossing of the Red Sea, the destruction of the Egyptian armies, the giving of the law to Moses, and the bestowal of the promised land on the children of Israel. God's frequent and beneficent interventions for his people in the past created a theological problem for Israelite thinkers in later years. On the one hand, the traditions of these interventions formed the basis of theological reflection on the nature of God and his relationship to his people. He would protect and defend them when they were endangered. On the other hand, historical realities seem to contradict these theological conclusions. For the nation suffered massively from time to time. It experienced drought, famine, and pestilence. The crops sometimes failed. There were political upheavals, and most noticeably, there were enormous military setbacks, especially when the northern kingdom was destroyed by the Assyrians in 722 BCE and the southern kingdom by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. The prophets, of course, had an answer ready to hand. The people were suffering not because God was powerless to do anything about it for his chosen ones, but precisely because God was all-powerful. It was God himself who was bringing this suffering upon his people, and it was because they had disobeyed him. If they would return to his ways, they would also return to his good favor. Suffering would then abate, and the people would once again enjoy peace and prosperity. So taught the prophets, whether Amos, Hosea, and Isaiah in the 8th century, or Jeremiah and Ezekiel in the 6th century, or, well, any prophet writing at any time. This was the prophetic view. But what happens when the prophetic view comes to be disconfirmed by the events of history? What happens when the people of Israel do exactly what the prophets urge them to do? Return to God, stop worshiping idols and following other gods, commit themselves to following the laws of God and given to Moses, repent of their evil ways, and return to doing what is right. The logic of the prophetic solution to the problem of suffering would suggest that then things would turn around and life would again be good. The historical problem was that there were times when the people did return to God, and it made absolutely no fucking difference in their lives of suffering. In fact, there were times when it was because they returned to following the ways of God that they suffered, when foreign powers oppressed them precisely because they insisted on following the laws that God had given Moses for his people. How could one explain suffering then? The people must not be suffering for their sins. They were now suffering for their righteousness. The prophetic answer could not handle that problem. The apocalyptic answer arose to deal with it. At this point, I should address a potential objection to my summary of what happened when Israel repented of its sins and returned to God. Many readers, especially those who come from a Christian Protestant background, will no doubt object to my claim that Jews began suffering precisely because they started living righteous lives. In some Christians' views, the Jews never could live righteous lives because they could never actually do everything that God commanded them to do in the law. And since they could never obey God's law, they were doomed to suffer. Sometimes when Christians reflect this view, it's nothing more or less than anti-Semitic, making a claim specifically about Jews as being a, quote, hard-necked and sinful people, unquote. But more often, this view is based on the Christian notion that no people, no matter how hard they try, can possibly do all that God wants them to do. According to this view, to say that the righteous suffer is a bit of nonsense. No one is righteous, so how can the righteous suffer? I should stress that this is a Christian view that was not shared by most ancient writers, especially the vast majority of ancient Jewish writers. The book of Job, for example, is quite explicit that Job was righteous before God and suffered even though he was innocent. The entire point of the book would have been lost if Job had deserved what he got. Then, for example, his so-called friends would have been right after all. He did not deserve it, and the book tries in at least two different ways to explain why then he suffered. So too with ancient Jewish apocalypticists. They also recognized the historical reality that Jewish people sometimes behaved righteously but suffered nonetheless. These thinkers did not take the views of Job, however, that it was all a test or that it was not a matter that can be explained to mere mortals by God. These thinkers believed that God had, in fact, explained the matter to them. And that is why scholars today call them apocalypticists. The word comes from a Greek term, apocalypsis. That means a revealing or an unveiling. Jewish apocalypticists believed that God had revealed or unveiled to them the heavenly secrets that God would make sense of earthly realities. In particular, they believed that God had shown them why his righteous people were suffering here on earth. It was not because God was punishing them, quite the contrary. It was because the enemies of God were punishing them. These were cosmic enemies. They were obviously not making people suffer for breaking God's law, just the opposite. As God's enemies, they made people suffer for keeping God's laws. For apocalypticists, cosmic forces of evil were loose in the world, and these evil forces were aligned against the righteous people of God, bringing pain and misery down upon their heads, making them suffer because they sided with God. But this state of affairs would not last forever. Jewish apocalypticists thought, in fact, that it would not last much longer. God was soon to intervene in this world and overthrow the forces of evil. He would destroy the wicked kingdoms of this world and set up his own kingdom, the kingdom of God, one in which God and his ways would rule supreme, where there would be no more pain, misery, or suffering. And when would this kingdom arrive exactly? In the words of the most famous Jewish apocalypticist of all, quote, "Truly I tell you, some of these standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God having come in power." Or, as he says later, to those who were standing right in front of him, "Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away before all these things take place." These are the words of Jesus. Like other apocalypticists of his day, Jesus believed that evil forces were causing suffering for the people of God, but that God was about to do something about it soon within his own generation. Not 2,000 years later, you dumbass Christians. Anyway, before we discuss the views of Jesus himself as portrayed in our earliest Gospels, it is important to see more specifically where apocalyptic views came from historically, and to sketch out the major tenets of Jewish apocalyptic thought as a kind of ancient theodicy, an explanation of how there could be suffering in the world if a good and powerful God was in charge of it. The origins of apocalyptic thought. What's going on, mystical gamer? I did the blunt one time, you feel me, play off. Here, you wanted this shit come. All right. Fuck. By the days of Jesus, Jewish apocalyptic thought had become a widespread and highly influential perspective among Jews, especially those living in Palestine. We can trace its roots to a period some 150 to 170 years before the birth of Jesus, during the events known to history as the Maccabean Revolt. This was a period of intense persecution of the Jews of Palestine by its non-Jewish ruler, the monarch of Syria. To make sense of this persecution and the Jewish response to it in the development of an apocalyptic worldview, we need to have a bit of background. As we've seen, Little Israel was constantly at the center of international struggles for domination of the Eastern Mediterranean. The country was overrun and its armies defeated by one superpower after another: the Assyrians in 722 BCE, the Babylonians in 586 BCE, the Persians in 539 BCE, the Greeks. The Greek armies were led by Alexander the Great between 356 and 323 BCE, who conquered the Persian Empire and helped spread Greek culture throughout much of the region east of the Mediterranean. When Alexander died an untimely death in 323 BCE, his large empire, which extended from Greece as far east as the Indus River, was divided among his generations. All right, blah, 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 was divided among his generals. Stupid. Anyway, Palestine, the later name for the land area that called today we think of as Israel, was ruled by the Egyptians until it was wrested from their control by the Syrians in 198 BCE. It's hard to know how most Jews felt about foreign domination during this entire time. For more than half a millennium, the Promised Land was not controlled by the chosen people, but by foreigners. No doubt, many Jews resented it, but we have few writings from the period, and so it's hard to know. What is abundantly clear is that matters got progressively worse under Syrian domination, particularly when the ruler Antiochus IV, otherwise known as Antiochus Epiphanes, came to the throne. Antiochus was not a benevolent ruler with a live and let live attitude toward the lands that he controlled. He was intent on extending his kingdom as far as possible. He added much of Egypt during this time on the throne, and on bringing a kind of cultural hegemony to the lands that he conquered. In particular, he was interested in forcing Greek culture, the form of culture thought to be the most advanced and civilized, on the peoples under his rule. This, of course, created enormous conflicts for Jews living in Palestine who were trying to follow the laws of Moses, which stood seriously at odds with the dictates of Greek culture. Jewish males, for example, were circumcised, something that most Greeks thought was bizarre, if not downright fucking hilarious. Food laws were observed, Sabbath day and certain festivals were honored, and above all, only the God of Israel was worshipped, not the foreign gods found in Greek cults scattered around the Mediterranean. Antiochus, however, wanted to change all that in his effort to make all the lands under his control consistent in terms of religion and culture. The account of his interactions with Israel is recorded for us in a Jewish writing known as First Maccabees, which is a detailed description of the violent uprising that began among the Jews in Palestine in 167 BCE against the policies of Antiochus. The book is named after a Jewish family responsible for starting the uprising, the Maccabees, based on the nickname of one of their leading men, Judas Maccabeus, i.e. Judas the Hammerer, presumably because he was a tough guy. The family is also known as the Hasmoneans, based on the name of a distant ancestor. For our purposes, what matters is not so much the course of events that eventually led to a Jewish victory and the establishment of an independent Jewish state, after all these centuries, in the Promised Land, a state that would last nearly a century until the land was conquered by the Romans in 63 BCE under the general Pompey. Rather, what matters to us here are the events that led up to the revolt, the attempt of Antiochus to rid Israel of its religion and culture. According to the First Maccabees, when Antiochus IV assumed the throne in 175 BCE, some renegade Jews in Israel eagerly supported the idea of converting the people of Israel to the ways of Greece. These men pushed Greek culture on other Jews. They built a Greek gymnasium in Jerusalem and even had operations to remove the marks of circumcision so that they could participate in sports without the embarrassing sign of circumcision there for all to see. Not everyone was happy with this state of affairs. Eventually, Antiochus came up against Jerusalem and attacked it, defiling the temple and removing from it the furniture and utensils used by the priests and offering sacrifices to God as prescribed in the Torah. As the author of the account tells us, Antiochus, quote, shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. 2 years later, Antiochus attacked the city a second time, burning parts of it, tearing down houses, and taking captive women and children. Then, in order to bring cultural unity to his entire kingdom, he sent out a message that everyone was to, quote, give up their particular customs. In particular, the sacrificial practices of the Jewish temple were forbidden. The temple was defiled. Jewish parents were forbidden to circumcise their baby boys, and no one was allowed to follow the dictates of the Mosaic law on pain of death. Then began a horrible persecution. Pagan sacrifices were offered in the temple. Altars to pagan gods were built throughout Judah. Books of the Torah were collected and burned. Anyone found with a Torah scroll was executed. And worse, according to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised and their families and those who circumcised them. And they hung the infants from the mothers' necks. Wow. What the fuck? How was one to make sense of this horrifying situation? Here was a case of people suffering not because God was punishing them for breaking the law, but because God's enemies were opposed to them keeping the law. The old prophetic view seemed unable to accommodate these new circumstances. a new view developed, the one that scholars today call apocalypticism. This view is first clearly expressed in a book that was produced during the time of the Maccabean Uprising, the final book of the Hebrew Bible to be written, the book of Daniel. I'm gonna fucking pause for the cause right there because I fucking feel like it or whatever, but MJ in this bitch. Thank you for moderating, you know what I'm saying, keeping everything on the up and fucking up. Boogie Tron, what's going on, player? I ain't even see you was in here. Sage Flips, what's up? Everybody, good looking out on the views, you know what I'm saying? Do I worship the devil? No, I don't believe in the devil. I mostly say all this shit just to trigger Christians because I find it fucking hilarious. But also, mostly, to point out their hypocrisy. Because I find that 99, if not 100% of the Christians on this app who regularly upload to this app, or if not to TikTok, then I feel like those Christians are not living the way that Jesus had instructed. Not in any way. I don't believe that they're giving like the most conscientious effort to fulfill the edicts in Matthew 24:14 or Matthew 7:1 or Matthew 23:9 or Matthew 5:22 or 1 Timothy 2 verses 11 and 12. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like they are not listening to the scriptures. And all I do and take quite pleasure in is pointing it out. And then, because ultimately it's like, how dare you? How dare you try to encourage me? Mostly just by inundating my comments with dumbass shit like, I love you and Jesus does too, or, you know, it's never too late. You can still come to God and all that bullshit. Like, constantly inundating me with that shit is not at all going to compel me to come to your fucking delusion. Like, I'm not doing it. But no, I don't believe in no motherfucking devil, dog. It's not something I subscribe to. I just think it's funny. Like, I don't believe that Michael Myers is a real murderer who has died many times, but for some reason just keeps making more and more movies. But anyway, I used to have a Michael Myers mask. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe Michael Myers is real. I don't believe the Halloween story. You know what I mean? I don't believe Laurie Strode was a real person. I don't believe any of it. But that doesn't mean I can't have a shirt that says Halloween with Michael Myers' face on it. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't mean I can't have a Michael Myers mask because I am a fan of the franchise. I'm a fan of the story. You know what I'm saying? Of the storyline, and but mostly I'm just a fan of the original characters from the 1978 version and shit. But that's what it is. So essentially, if you want to talk about the Bible, first of all, I don't feel like the devil got enough representation throughout the Bible. I mean, for all the goddamn murdering that was going on and all the slaughtering and shit that was happening and all the sending pestilences and then testing motherfuckers. Like, how you gonna test Job just to win a bet with the devil? What the fuck? It's like, bro, I swear to Bob, he ain't gonna turn against me. So you put him through all that shit. Killed off his children just to prove a point. And then like, oh, nah, it's all good. They gave him more children. And it's like, what the fuck does that mean? So he ain't supposed to miss the children that he lost because they've been replaced with new children? Is that how he thinks human beings work? Like, I just watched my 10 children be slaughtered. Well, technically they're where they were living at, I think, crushed in on him and shit and killed all 10 of them, his 7 sons and his 3 daughters, only to have his 7 sons and 3 daughters replaced with 7 and 3 new kids. But it's like, well, what about the last 10? I'm supposed to just not give a fuck about them. I just lost 10 children who I will mourn for the rest of my life. But I guess it's all good because you gave me 10 more kids. It's like, get the fuck out of here. That whole story is insane. And just so that God could prove a point, like, that's so fucking dumb. Like, just like what he did with Abraham and Isaac. Like, bro, I need you to kill your son. What type of shit is that? Can you imagine? It's like, especially when God told Abraham that, bro, your son is going to be great. He's going to be the leader of a nation and all that shit. And then you finally have a son. Mind you, Abraham's like 100 years old at this time. You've been waiting 100 motherfucking years. You know what I'm saying? You finally give him a son, and then you're going to tell him, I need you to go kill it, though. I need you to knife that motherfucker to death. And it's like, oh, hell nah. So now he got to lie to his son, like, yo, come with me somewhere real quick. We about to go do some shit. You know what I mean? And then they get to the spot, and his son looking around like, excuse me, I don't see the sacrificial lamb. And he like, oh, don't worry. God will give it to us. He'll provide it for us. And then when he wasn't looking, he snatched his ass up, tied his ass up. And just before he started to run him through with the damn knife, God sent the fucking Holy Spirit to be like, excuse me, lay your hand off that boy. Don't you dare hurt him. This was all a test. We just wanted to make sure that you was, you know what I'm saying, loyal to God and shit. And you are. Good job. You passed the test. It's like, can you imagine being fucking Isaac? I'd be like, oh, hell nah. I'm not going nowhere with dad ever again. Like, nah, I need all the details. You're like, son, we about to go do the no, the fuck we're not. Nah, last time I trusted your motherfucking ass, you was trying to kill me and shit. He's like, it all worked out. You know what I'm saying? You still here and shit. Blessed be to God, right? I'm like, oh, hell nah. Fuck that. But yeah, so I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, that shit don't make no sense. Like, so God just be fucking with people. Just do horrible shit to people just because he can. Fuck it. And then didn't even have the nuts to give fucking Job an explanation. Just gonna be like, bitch, did you create the earth? All right then, shut the fuck up. I can do whatever the fuck I want. I'm God, bitch. Fuck you mean? You know, and it's like, oh wow, God is off the chain. So yeah, I'm just, bruh. That's why I'm like, I can't. But anywho, so all that shit, and it's like, well, the devil was just asking questions. You know what I'm saying? Like, whatever. But nonetheless, it's like all the killing all throughout the Old Testament, man. That was all God. God left and right. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, man, shout out to the devil, dog. You know what I'm saying? But that's my homie, at least from the story. And that's what I mean. I look at the Bible, it's just a story. It's like a franchise. You know what I'm saying? An Old Testament and a New Testament. Breaking Dawn Part 2 and shit. You know what I'm saying? And I just like it. So, like, the character in the story that I fuck with, that I just thought was cool as shit, is the devil. So that's the shit I be wearing. Shit that's, like, supposed to be representative of the devil. Doesn't mean I believe he really fucking exists. Doesn't mean I worship him. I just like the shit that's associated with him. Just like Christians, like, they like the Jesus character, so they like to have shit that's associated with the Jesus character, whether they believe he exists or not, you know. That's all I'm saying. Shit, I don't believe this shit. Fuck you mean? I just like how I look. You know, I'm a fan of that part of the storyline. Even though he don't really get much representation throughout the Bible. That's fucked up. For him to be such an essential part of the story, he really don't get much, you know what I'm saying? His line short as fuck. Like, if this was a movie, the devil don't get many lines at all. It's like God get all the motherfucking lines. You know what I'm saying? God, Jesus, rando ass motherfucking NPC ass motherfuckers in the stories and shit. Everybody. But the devil. Devil don't get to speak that much. I feel like compiling a list of all the times that Satan himself spoke throughout the Bible, compared to all the times Jesus spoke, or God spoke. Just to be like, see, this shit is skewed, son. The devil ain't got enough representation, player. Not too. Say, because it's God's story. I ain't drinking no motherfucking water. What the fuck? I'll drink some coffee. I'm gonna drink some coffee right now. Shit. Yeah, bro, I smoking that shit. You know how I go. They say if you ain't smoking, you ain't. They say if you ain't choking, you ain't getting high. You know what I mean? I don't know how much I believe that, but that's what I heard. Hot. It sure is hot outside. Shit. I'm in Ohio. It's hot than a motherfucker out there. Hot than a motherfucker. You said you believe it. Like, I don't know. I don't know, dog. I've been smoking forever, son. Like, I've been smoking since I was 18. And I'm 42. And I've only started smoking. I've been smoking more now than I did when I was in my 20s. But when I was in my 20s, I was smoking all that Reggie and shit. You know what I'm saying? I miss that shit for real, for real. That shit was strong. At least the Reggie I used to get. Now everybody got loud as shit or mid. You know what I'm saying? But most of the shit I fuck with come from the fucking dispensaries and shit. My shit be a fucking throat crushers, goddamn it. Like, that's what they should call a strain. Throat crusher, goddamn it, OG. Fucking shit fucking make your neck fall off, goddamn it. It's humid as fuck in Ohio right now. You ain't lying. You said Florida is so bad right now. Like, Florida is permanently bad, son. Y'all got Ron DeSantis. Fucking hell. You said it's down there. It's humid down there too. Where you at, Mary Jane? I cooked bacon outside this morning and regret it every minute. I would have too, for real, for real. Florida, god damn. Why y'all in Florida, bro? Y'all down there with Moist Critical and shit. I know he in Florida. I just don't know where at. Probably like Tampa or some weird shit. I don't know. Jacksonville. Is that where you at? You said Jacksonville's the worst. I'm here against my will. That's how I feel about Ohio. Like, I'm stranded here thanks to poverty and shit. Right. I'm here I'm here under duress. Mm-hmm. Virginia says 98 degrees out there. God damn. It ain't 98 degrees here in well shit, I don't know how hot it is. I ain't outside. Fuck going out there. It's hot. I went out there earlier when it was raining and shit. It was all right. Thanks, Corvo. What's up, Stacy? So what's up, brother? Love your channel. I appreciate that. I really do. I just be doing, you know what I'm saying, my best. What's up, brother? All right, right there. It's 105 here in Phoenix. God damn. Well, that's because you in Phoenix. Fuck you mean? You knew what it was. You did? Toshi at Walmart? That's what's up. Man, I appreciate that. Octo Kitten Guy. That's a funny name. Octo Kitten Guy says you're honestly so funny. You know what? Motherfuckers here. One guy said I should have. I like a couple people I've read into in my life, in my adulthood, late in my adulthood, has suggested that I become a comedian. And one guy actually asked me, he's like, "Do you ever write jokes?" And I'm like, "I actually don't, but I've never even thought of that, to write jokes, because most of my humor is kind of like on the spot. It's kind of like, you know what I mean? But I do have some humor that I probably could like if I was to write it out, that should be funny as fuck, just to remember it. But I'd be forgetting to do that and shit. So I don't know. But I wouldn't want to be a comedian anyway. Like, that's not really the way I want to go. But it is something that came up. Like, someone has suggested it. Shit, when I used to work at Rent-A-Center, I used to have my one dude in the truck with me and shit. I used to have him cracking up. Like, he'd be in tears. Couldn't breathe. And all I was doing was just talking about my personal life. Like, that's all I was doing. And he just thought it was fucking hilarious. Maybe improv could be, thought maybe doing some voice acting or something. I don't fucking know. And I left the stream and I scrolled down. I got back to the stream. You made it. As a 48-year-old person, I got so many personal jokes. I feel you, bro. Like, you said 48. I'll be 43 this year because I'm old, son. We old, dog. You was born in the 70s. I was born at the beginning of the 80s. We old, son. What up, Gruff Maine? Gruff Maine in the beach. Gruff Maine, I am old, though. I feel old. Like there's a big difference between the videos I make now and the and the TikToks I used to make like 2-3 years ago and shit. Back when I had more teeth. Well, I'm glad you do, man. I don't be knowing how people take to them really. Like, I just be, for real, I just be liking to read. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like reading aloud helps me to understand the material better. Even though when I read it to myself quietly, like in my head, I can read it faster. Like, I guess I can process the information quicker. I don't know. Well, probably, yeah, because I don't have to like worry about trying to pronounce the words vocally. You know what I mean? I can just try to like figure it out in my head. But I kind of have to do it in real time when I'm reading out loud. And that's fine, because I'm going to get better at it. Plus, reading has helped me expand my vocabulary somewhat significantly. But most of the language, pertains, well, I'm not going to say it pertains specifically to religion, but it's language that I can use against Christians or just anyone who fails to think critically or just to reason like a normal fucking person, like whatever epistemology you're using to go about your day-to-day activities, why aren't you using that same epistemology when it comes to your God? Like, why are we doing something different? And that's what I don't understand. Something happens. They're able to compartmentalize their normal, rational, intellectual self, thoughts rather, apart from their indoctrinated fucking, from that side. Like, that's how you got scientists, some of which, who still hold on to a personal God, the notion of a personal God. Although 93% of them don't, 7% still do. It's in 1969, William Billy B. I'm gonna call you Billy B. Billy B. He's like, my last name is not B. It's Kilber. It's Kilber. It should be Billy K. I'm like, yeah, but K don't sound right. Billy K. I'm like, that's okay. But I'd rather Billy B. Because A, it feels good to say. And B, it sounds better. Plus, you have a B in your last name. So it's not totally like off. It's pretty close. Billy B. Oh, shit. As a Christian, I don't understand why all these so-called Christians act this way. Oh, well, I don't know, brother. I think I only say so-called Christians, but if they feel they're Christians, then I agree with them. Like, whatever they think Christian means, I agree. Because who the fuck am I? Yeah, we really don't. If Baphomet is real, then so must be God. Baphomet is not real. There, we can stop there. Don't need to even read the rest. Because it's just that simple. If Baphomet is real, then so must be God. Well, Baphomet is not. All right, let's use your logic. If Baphomet is not real, then God must not be real. See how that works? I can do that too. We can just flip it. And this Baphomet is for sure not real, as I'm sure you would attest to. Like, no, Baphomet's not real. Therefore, exactly. And it's like, why do you suppose that I worship Baphomet? See, you're just making assumptions without knowing me at all. I don't worship anything. Simply having a Baphomet statue doesn't mean I worship it. If anything, it's when I'm not having him in the videos, he's really just holding up my books. And then when I want to use them in my videos, I'll find something else to hold up my books, put them in a video. It's that simple. I don't worship anything. If anything, I would say that I worship living. How about that? I worship living. Whatever the fuck that means, take it how you want. You know what I mean? I believe in myself as my own God and my own story. Well, I hear you. Do you believe in God, fam? I'll put it this way. I believe there's a God. Like, I believe Peter Pan can really fly me in the sky to Neverland. Like, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that shit just, it don't even kind of sound real. You know what I mean? Like, it just, what are you talking about? Stop. No, we're not. Kanye don't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's really a dum-dum, but for some reason, he's been convinced that he's a genius when, if that's a genius, then we have really set the bar low. Yes, it does, Mary Jane. If you have a statue of anything, apparently you worship that thing. Or what if it don't even have to be a statue? What if it's just a doll? You know, like those little dolls you can get from like fucking Spencer's Gifts in the mall and shit. They're like dolls of like Chucky and fucking Freddy and shit. You know what I mean? Or like the little action figures, but like you don't never take them out the package. You just leave it on the shelf when you buy it at the house. Like, you know what I mean? Does that mean I would worship those things now? Or is it just, or can I just have something that I think looks cool that I feel like matches the decor that I wanted to have in my house? Could it just be that, or does it have to be like, oh no, you worship that, dog? It's like, well, what do you consider worship? Like, you know what I mean? It's just so ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. You have a Baphomet. You worship it. I'm gonna buy a Jesus one just so I can be like, oh no, he worshiped Jesus. I'm like, yep, see, I have a Jesus statue. That means I worship Jesus. And then I'm going to get a Buddha. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to get all kind of shit so that I just want to see if people be like, oh, that's what you worship? And I'm like, oh, so is it just, I don't get it. Like, what is the criterion for you to consider it something that you must be worshiping? Why would I buy a Jesus statue? Will that convince you that I'm a Jesus person now? They don't have any accurate Jesus ones. Jesus was clearly a Jew. You know what I'm saying? But all the time I see Jesus, he just looks like some European dude. And it's like, that ain't what he looked like. You know what I mean? I'm not saying he was black, but that would be closer in complexion. You know what I'm saying? Dave, love your views and the way you narrate. Thanks, Sage Kenny. I love that you subbed today. Well, thanks, The Reaper. But you shouldn't be. You should be trying to convince me to come to your Jesus. Because that is what you've been instructed to do. Matthew 24:14. And this good news of the kingdom shall be preached in all the inhabited earth as a witness to the nation. And then the end will come, something like that. I don't fucking know. I don't remember it word for word. At least we can see Baphomet. Woohoo! How do you know the Bible quite well? Because I always read it. I have read it. I continue to read it. I study it, as you can tell from me reading earlier. This is a book specifically dealing with the issue of human suffering in light of there being allegedly an all-powerful, all-loving God. How can this be so? And so it's sort of tackling that problem. But this is like, I read many books on religion, specifically Christianity. So I mean, so not only am I, and I'm constantly having to go back to the Bible to reference scriptures, cross-reference them with the information that I gleaned from these books to see how they line up and the interpretations and what the evidence is and so on and so forth. Like, because I find it all interesting, you know. Plus, I just like knowing shit, you know what I mean? I get that most Christians aren't even as interested in Christianity as I am, and I'm not even a fucking Christian. You know what I mean? I don't subscribe to any gods because I'm not convinced that any of them are real. There's just no compelling evidence, no good arguments, none. Not that I don't end up in some fucking logical fallacy. Oh, well, I appreciated Olive's Vintage Market. Thanks for the support. Would I ever date a believer? Yes, but they would have to be like they don't really give it much effort. Like if you were to ask them, hey, do you believe in God? They'd be like, yeah, sure. You know, but they don't like go to church. They don't read the Bible. They don't, you know, they're just sort of like, yeah, I believe in a God, I guess. You know, sure, Jesus, whatever. That kind of person, yeah, I could date them. But someone who's like, you must turn over your life to Jesus. It's like, that person, not at all. Like I can't. You know, because I would feel like I'd be spending most of my time trying to get them to do some introspection, to approach the Bible with a sense of intellectual and moral integrity. You know what I mean? And I would be doing this regularly as opposed to focusing on our relationship and trying to make that mature as opposed, you know what I mean? Like, so I don't think I could do it. Like, nah. You have to just be like, because if that, like I said, because if you was just like, oh yeah, I believe in a God, but I don't really like fuck around. It's like, that's cool. That doesn't bother me, you know. Because you're not gonna try to get me to like go to church or nothing. But you would also have to be cool with me regularly shitting on Christianity because it's just so fun. Holy shit. What's up, Jake? What's up, Monticello? Why are you so interested in religion and reading the Bible if you don't believe any of the shit? Mostly, just because I like knowing more of it than most Christians do. You know what I mean? It's like I like knowing what all arguments they have for their God so that I can learn how to diffuse or, you know, destroy those arguments. Because they're not hard to do. Like, most of them are pretty fucking easy. It's just those deeper ones where it's like, well, let me go do some fucking research now. Now I got to go study fucking, now I've been having to go do a bunch of research and study into consciousness just to have an answer for that. I have one now, by the way, but I had to go do that shit. Then I had to go like get 3 books that I've read on just evolution, just so I could have a better argument for evolution. Like, I know it exists, but it's like, I mean, like, I know it's a fact of life. Like that's not even a dispute amongst serious scientists. You know what I'm saying? They may dispute how it happens, when it happens, where it happens, how often it happens, in what way it happens. But that it happens is not a dispute. That is just a fact. Like gravity is a fact. It's a fact. What's up, Fungus? I'm studying in demonology. It's starting to fun to listen to Christians talking. They know everything about what is demonic or what demons are. I know. Have you read the Malleus Maleficarum? That to me is like, to me, the Malleus Maleficarum is sort of the Bible. I know there's more than one Malleus is written, but the Malleus Maleficarum is the one that I've read that I pretty much feel like is the Bible explaining all that supernatural shit, like the power of angels, how they work. Same thing with demons and how they work, and how like demons prefer women because they're easier to manipulate and blah, blah, blah. I just thought all that shit was like, what? But it also explained like free will and like all this other shit, the soul and how that works, like all that shit. I just wanted to know, like, wow. Now, I got more out of it than I was led to believe I'd get out of it when I first bought the book, because I thought it was just going to talk about rules for prosecuting witches. Now, it was a lot of that, but it was like, in order to give the rules, they sort of had to explain their rationale behind the rule. And that was that shit that was interesting. Like, oh, okay. So yeah, I just, so I'm always reading books on Christianity because for real, if there is a God, I would like to know that, Now, I don't have to assume it's the God of Christianity. It could literally be Zeus for all we fucking know. He up there mad as fuck. Like, what the fuck? Niggas just stop believing in me and shit. Who the fuck is Jesus? I know he's Saudi. But nah, I'm just like, but could you imagine if there was a God and the one true God was some God none of us ever fucking heard of? Like nobody on earth heard of this God, but that was the one true God. And what if he was just as petty as the God of the Bible? And he was like, oh no, all of y'all are fucked. Did nobody worship me? Nobody ever mentioned me. Fuck you petty ass humans. So how about all of y'all going to my own personal hell? And it's like, you don't fucking know. You know what I mean? It could be. You feel me, 1010? Yeah, bro. I'm live. Not for long, though. I'm finna get off this bitch. I ain't even know I've been on here this fucking long. I've been on here an hour and a half, son. God damn. It was bright outside when I first started. Thanks, Panda Fuzz. I appreciate that, dog. 1010, I don't really care about it either, but I feel like Christianity, specifically Christian nationalism, is a threat to democracy. And if you haven't read Project 2025, which I don't blame you if you haven't, because it's like over 900 fucking pages. But nonetheless, there's been plenty of coverage about Project 2025. So if you just Google or just in YouTube, when you're done watching me, just put in the search Project 2025 and just watch people talk about it, like what it's supposed to bring, like what it means and its implications. And it's absolutely terrible. It's pretty much just the end of the U.S. democratic experience as we know it, if it were to be implemented. No hyperbole. Like, it's straight up. And it's gross, but it's not coming from the Muslims. It's not coming from the atheists. It's not coming from the LGBTQ community. It's coming from these motherfucking bigoted ass goddamn right-wing Christian nationalists who are trying to absolutely rip apart America because they just don't give a fuck about the Constitution or Jesus or none of that shit. That's why I give Christianity such a hard time. If more people could see that Christianity has been nothing but a force for negativity, a force for oppression and segregation. Like, it's been an overwhelmingly negative force. It's had an overwhelmingly negative impact on humanity, particularly in the 21st century, I would imagine. I could be completely overlooking or minimizing other times, but just sticking with the time in which I exist. Christianity has just been terrible, and any good that could come from Christianity, we could have gotten it without Christianity. We didn't need Christianity in order to do the good that came from Christianity. None of the good lessons that could be gleaned from Christianity could we have not learned elsewhere. Like, There is nothing unique about the story or about the messages or the life lessons that are in the Bible that we didn't just already, that motherfucking Confucius didn't already come up with, or Epicurus didn't already come up with. Like, fuck you mean? They've been coming up with this shit, son. So it's not even nothing worth holding on to in the Bible. The stories are dumb. You know what I mean? Like, some of the epistles are nice. You know what I mean? But even those are fucking hilarious, especially the epistles of John. Like, I mean, the epistles of Paul. That shit is fucking hilarious. But aside from that, it's like, we just don't fucking need it, you know? I mean, there's all sort of interpretations of what his name is. And later on, late in the New Testament, they call him Michael, you know, or Yeshua, Jesus. What was another one? It was like, well, I can't think of the other one. It was like a couple other names that Jesus had in the story. So who's to say what his actual name was? You know, that's why it's like there's not even a consensus on what Jesus's name is. You know what I'm saying? Because Christ isn't his last name. Christ is a title like king or lieutenant or some shit. So technically he would be Jesus the Christ, you know, but I wonder how many Christians even fucking know that, you know. But I've been reading a lot about it. Like I said, I read a lot about Christianity because I want to fucking know, you know. And mostly I like pointing out the flaws. Like, I just found another verse that's like, bruh, like in Jeremiah. Like, Jeremiah is a banger of a motherfucking book in the Old Testament. Jeremiah is off the motherfucking chain. And that's one of my favorite books. Jeremiah and Hosea, bruh. Hosea and Jeremiah have got to be my two favorite books of the Bible, followed by First Timothy. Like, I'm going to just keep it real. Like, but Jeremiah is off the chain. Like, off the motherfucking chain. Hosea is fucking wild. You know what I mean? But Timothy is just fucking, for me, Timothy is hilarious. Like, for me, that's just all it is. Like, First Timothy is fucking hilarious. Comedy. You know what I mean? That's why I don't mind reading the Bible, because you be coming across shit. You like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? You like, oh, hell nah. Say that shit again. And you're just like, wow, this shit is wild. And I'm supposed to read this to children? Whoa, you know what I mean? Like, why is this shit in here like this? This shit gratuitous. This shit was in here for motherfuckers to masturbate to. Like, what the fuck? Or some of the shit just be straight up funny. Like one time Jesus snapped on these motherfuckers. It's like, what the fuck? He was like, straight up. He was like, excuse me. Why are you asking me these questions? Did you not read the book? Did you not see it? I'm like, oh wow, Jesus is having a moment right now. He losing it on these motherfuckers. I'm like, they doing what I do. Like, hell nah. Jesus had a couple moments though where he just kind of like forgot who he was for a second. Like, all right, I'm supposed to be nice and humble and shit. And that motherfucker just snapped. That's why I like the Bible. Like, I don't believe none of it. I think it's horrible and no one should like live their life according to its dictates, but outside of that, it's like, bro, it's an interesting book. Like, that's why I be reading it and shit. Plus, I just be wanting to know. Like I said, I just be wanting to know shit. I have an insatiable thirst for knowledge, particularly when it comes to Christianity. One of these days, I'm gonna go to church just so I can ask the preacher some questions. But before I do that, I want to make sure I have answers to every single rebuttal, at least 3 of the most common rebuttals that I would expect to receive from a lay person, you know what I'm saying, who doesn't study this shit, you know what I'm saying, like I do. And others, because I be watching podcasts, I subscribe to other biblical historians, you know, because I be wanting to hear all the arguments. You know, I want to hear the arguments from people on the God side, the non-God side. Like, I just want to know, what are the arguments? Make your case. And usually they're just not good. They make a bunch of unwarranted presuppositions for the God side. And it's like, bruh, none of this shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, even Dr. Craig's fucking syllogisms that he put together, his dumbass fucking Kalam, doesn't even get you to God. And then I heard somebody try to extend the Kalam cosmological argument, making the the conclusion simply his third premise, and then his fourth. Then he had a fourth premise, and then a conclusion. And I'm like, I don't agree with the third or the fourth premise, and the first and second premises both are problematic. But I guess we're supposed to just presuppose that they're correct. Negative. I mean, like, nah, dog. It's just there's just no compelling argument that can be logically put together that would compel me or any rationally thinking person to believe that the God of the Bible specifically is real. Now, you can make a compelling argument for like a deistic God, like some God that just, got everything started but has no interest whatsoever in what the fuck we do, does not intervene in our lives at all. He just got everything started and fucked off. That's the closest you'll get me to believing in a God. That there's just some nebulous thing out there that got everything started but doesn't fuck with us at all, doesn't want nothing from us, doesn't have any demands, none of that. You know what I'm saying? I still don't subscribe to that notion. But if I ever were to, that's the closest you'll get me. Because there's no logical argument that can get you from, okay, there's some God that created everything, and it's this one. And he says, don't have sex with other dudes. And it's like, squeeze me? How do we know this? How can you know this? It's in this book. That book is dumb. And that shouldn't convince you or anyone. And why would I take that book more seriously than, say, the Quran or the Torah or the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedic texts? Like, why would I take the Bible more seriously than any of those? The Dead Sea Scrolls get you nowhere. You know what I mean? The Shroud of Turin is trash. Like, what do you got? There is no Noah's Ark. I don't give a fuck what you thought was found on the top of Mount Ararat, bitch. Nope, it's fake. It's been debunked. There's no such thing because that flood never fucking happened, son. Not a worldwide flood. Not saying there wasn't some local flood, but not no motherfucking 40 days, 40 nights, covered the tallest mountain peaks. Get the fuck out of here. Like, you got to be a complete dum-dum if you believe that story. And completely disinterested in science. Like, because you could just do the fucking science or do the math and just see, like, there's no fucking way, no shot that they flooded the earth at any point in history ever. Like, it's just absurd. There might be. But Boogie and his bitch. And I'm going to be out. Thanks for watching, you guys. I will catch y'all on the flip side. Hail Satan.